Hey guys, we're in Zip It day 3. So if you're reading along with us, remember this will be a snippet on other social media platforms, but the full reading will be available on our YouTube channel. So a lot of our longer readings, we'll try to do those on YouTube. Okay, so I hope you'll follow along with us for that. But we're in Zip It 40-day challenge, day 3. Shutting down the motor mouth. Oof. I could use help with that. When there are many words, transgression and offense are unavoidable. But he who controls his lips and keeps thoughtful silence is wise. Proverbs 10:19. Excuse me. This dog show has me exhausted. I had never heard the sound before. The loud rumbling seemed to shake the house. It was coming from the basement, and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was. All I knew was that it sounded dangerous. I was tucked cozily in my home office writing, so I put down my coffee mug and ventured downstairs to investigate. However, by the time I reached the basement, the rumbling had stopped. The mystery remained. A few days later, I was in our kitchen. Again, the rumbling started. Just as before, I dashed to the basement to try to figure out where the monstrous mechanical noise was coming from. But just like before, the rumbling ceased before I made it to our lower level. Later that day, I alerted my husband to what had been going on. We weren't sure if it was the furnace, the sump pump, or some other motorized contraption making the reverberation boom. We decided to sit tight and wait for it to happen again. A few days later, early on a Sunday morning, my husband rose after hitting the off button on his alarm and began to walk down the hallway. He stopped in his tracks when he heard a low but constant humming sound. It was not the loud shaking boom I had experienced, but nevertheless, he dashed to the basement to investigate. There he discovered our septic tank injector was running constantly, its motor clearly approaching burnout. A quick search on the internet showed him this was nothing to fool with. We needed to get it repaired immediately. But before we could do that, we needed to shut off the motor, which was now making an even louder, higher-pitched hum. He shut off the motor and put a sign on the lower-level bathroom telling our family members not to use it. Yes, if the motor hadn't been shut down, the consequences would have been extremely messy. Septic and sewer issues must be addressed. If left unattended, they can cause major stink, literally. Proverbs 10:19 teaches this is true not only in the plumbing world, but with our mouths as well. As the Amplified Bible version says, when there are many words, transgression and offense are unavoidable. But he who controls his lips and keeps thoughtful silence is wise. Have you ever let your constant stream of words get you into trouble? I sure have. More than once. When we constantly run our motor mouths, we create a situation with a greater chance of saying something that offends or that we'll regret later. It is nearly unavoidable. As Proverbs 10:19 clearly states, the solution, it's found in the latter half of the verse. We must seek to control our tongues and instead employ the tool of thoughtful silence. Thoughtful silence doesn't mean we never speak. It means we need to zip up our lips to avoid uttering something we will later wish we could take back. It means we give careful and prayerful thought to our words we might speak. using discernment to decide if we should speak at all. Today, let's not just watch what kind of words roll off our lips. Let's also prudently monitor how many. Constantly running motors, whether machine or mouth, are prone to malfunction, thereby causing a mighty mess. Today's takeaways. Too many words can lead to much heartache. It's a matter of simple mathematics. The more words we speak, the more opportunities we have to slip up and offend someone, even if the offense is unintentional. An overabundance of rhetoric is often a setup for sin. By intentionally paring back the quantity of our words, we can make sure they are quality words, true, kind, and necessary. Silence speaks. Don't underestimate the ability of silence to speak volumes. When we refuse to jump into a conversation full of criticism, gossip, or idle talk, our silence speaks. It attests to our character and indicates to others that we will not be pulled into pettiness. Give your lips a rest and seek to perfect the art of wise and thoughtful silence as advised in today's verse. Lesson for the lips. Let's talk quantity. Circle the phrase below that most closely describes you when it comes to how often you talk in social situations or interactions in your relationship. I am relatively quiet most of the time, usually speaking less than others in a group setting and rarely voicing my opinion. I am quiet sometimes, especially with people I don't know, but other times I talk a great deal in group setting and offer my opinion when directly asked. I talk about as much as the average person, giving my opinions without dominating conversations. I'm considered by most to be a chatterbox, talking more than others in almost every social situation and freely giving my opinion. Based on the description you circled, would you like to make any changes? Do you need to make an adjustment in how often you speak? If so, what? Write out a sentence or two with your goal in this area. A prayer. Father, your word tells me that where there is a great deal of talk, there is a great potential for offending someone and even sinning. May I carefully monitor the number of words I speak today, making sure that my words are true, kind, and necessary at the moment. Muzzle me when I need to remain silent. May my words glorify you and encourage others. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. So, I can definitely understand this. I can be kind of chatty, um, especially like when people are talking about things that I know. Um, I can be chatty. I can also be, when people start asking questions about my disability, I will freely share information. And sometimes, I do notice like conversations kind of end up being primarily about like that. And I will try to turn conversations away, so that it doesn't feel like everything's um, just about like dogs or about my disability or my difficulties. Like, people tend to be curious, and I don't mind sharing that stuff. But there's other times when, like, I'm at a huge dog show right now, and people can be very chatty and gossipy and, just normal kind of, to me, it's just like normal dog show stuff. But like, I do find that people, sometimes people who kind of portray themselves as being friendly that I've maybe trusted in the past or shared personal information with in the past, um, maybe I don't need to share as much with them. They're not really actually my friends. And so I need to maybe have a little bit more discernment with who I'm willing to share information with. So I've noticed that about myself. But I also know, like, sometimes when I'm nervous, I'll talk a lot. Like, if I'm really, really nervous, because I can be nervous in social situations sometimes. And I can get really chatty if I'm nervous. And sometimes it's important to just, like this is telling us, to just be quiet, because you might say something and then you think, okay, well, maybe, you're trying to read their facial expressions and body language, and you're like, okay, well, I don't really know, like they're not really responding in the way that I expected them to, and you just kind of keep talking. At least that's what I know about myself. Maybe you experience it too. And sometimes it's just best to just stop talking, just stop talking. Not every time do you need to share your opinion. And this is something that I've learned and grown as the older that I get, is that I don't need to share my opinion all the time. Like, especially, like, primarily my life is surrounded by dogs, right? It's the dog world. And so people will, want to gossip about so-and-so's dog. I don't, are you the owner? Did you ask my opinion on your dog? Are you asking me if I would use that dog as a stud? I will tell you, yes or no. And I might tell you why I wouldn't use that dog as a stud. But typically speaking, I try not to share my opinion broadly on other people's dogs, because it just turns into gossip. And it ends up being just people chit-chatting behind each other's backs. And I don't think that that's helpful, but guarantee you there's other ways, other situations, other topics, other things that you can look at in your life. Maybe it's a look at how that person, dresses. I get picked on for my dresses, the way that I dress all the time. Oh, well, what you wore today didn't look as Amish. Okay, well, I'm not sure where you got Amish from what is very clearly a pioneer style attire, but that's fine. That's your opinion. I don't need to, have a conversation with you about it. So sometimes people can be gossipy and snippy, and, so I think that if we stop talking, sometimes we can avoid offending people by just word vomiting. I'm sure you can think of some people in public situations that just word vomit, where you're like, you should just stop, right? And I can think of a few from many different situations, and where I'm like, just stop talking. At some point, like, I really wish you would just stop talking. I get it. I understand what you're saying, but the more you talk, the more ridiculous this starts to sound. I got the point within the first few, things that you said, but now it's getting a little bit drawn out. And so think about that kind of stuff. But I also think that when we, close our mouths and don't say just don't start spewing a bunch of stuff out our mouths, I think it allows us to gain more, discernment, because we can actually listen. If you're talking, you can't really listen at the same time. But when you stop talking, and you stop, trying to think about what you're going to say in response to somebody, you can genuinely and truly hear what they're saying. And that can provide you, that information may provide you with some discernment. Like I said, there's people in my life that, maybe I don't need to be as friendly or be as open in my sharing with, because they don't really intend to use the information for good things. but I won't know if I don't stop talking. If I listen more, if I listen to what they're saying and I listen to the heart behind what they're saying, then I could understand that better. And that's something that, I work on in my own life. Um, because I try, as someone that's worked in, the military and worked in the intelligence field, like I try not to bring that into my personal life. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt and be very trusting of people and let them show me who they are rather than just assuming that they are ill-intended. Um, and that's something that has gotten me in trouble before, and it maybe wouldn't get me in as much trouble if I would just zip it. But that's kind of what comes to my mind as I read through this. I'd love to hear what you guys think. You can share that. Tell me if what kind of came to you as you were listening, or if you purchased the book and you're reading along. I'd love to hear. So I appreciate you guys. I had to read inside this evening because it was a long day. We had 2 designated specialties, right? So we had the Doug Argentino Club of South Texas, and then the Central Florida Doug Argentino Club. So it was 2 shows. Now, I was only in one of them, but I watched the other one. And then after that, we had a judges education seminar where they help educate judges on how to judge the breed of Dogo Argentinos. And so I participated in that. And so we got done kind of late, and then it was feed the dogs and supper. So we're reading inside, but I wanted to make sure that I got you guys this video out so that we could stay on schedule. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll continue to follow along. God bless, and we will see you next time.